Hello, everybody, and welcome to GCRE TV. Today, we're going to be having the Mobile Home Park Show with Glenn. This is season 1, episode 3. We're going to be talking about understanding your tenant base and everything that you need to know about them, from vetting to managing the expectations to sort of, all the other little bits and pieces that you need to know. Apologies for being late a few minutes today. That was my fault. We had some technical difficulties, but we're okay here now. We're going to welcome Glenn to the call. So, Glenn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's just been a marvelous, last month or so as far as running my team and spending time with my family. I know it's still a pretty hard time out there in life for a lot of people, but here in our industry, it's almost like it never happened. For better or worse, it's an amazing amount of transactions. I was just tallying up the number of deals we've done just in September. We've 6 deals so far this month, and maybe 2 more are supposed to close today. So that's almost double the amount of transaction volume we normally do, which is kind of testament to this industry. Which brings us into being able to, why are people coming in here and what's happening to the tenants that all this new money's coming into, and how to, how to really understand the exposure when it comes to your tenant base, and really understand how to add to the to the bottom line of the tenants' happiness levels in your park, because a happy tenant is going to make you a more successful operator.
That's true.
And so it's, in many of the other verticals right now, a lot of the tenants are very scared and very unhappy, and they're having problems paying rent, and they're having challenges, just meeting their basic needs, which where the affordable housing industry really comes into play is, it doesn't get any cheaper than our asset class. And I think it's giving our tenants a bit more resiliency to what's happening in our economy right now, and all this commotion out there that's happening. And, it's been paying dividends for our investors here, because our collections, our occupancy, we're all more or less pre-COVID levels. Not too many industries can say that.
Okay, good. So, Glenn, today we have this is, as we do, we're doing a whole setup with you. Season 1, episode 3, the Mobile Home Park Show with Glenn, which I'm proud to be hosting with yourself. Quite an energetic, quite a very knowledgeable, very understanding, caring, but very on the point kind of person when it comes to mobile home parks. And I know we've talked about, should we use the name mobile home parks or should we change it and stuff like that. But today we're going to jump on understanding your tenants, which is what the show is all about today, episode 3. So, Glenn, I'm going to hand it over to you now, and then you could tell everybody everything that they need to know, and then we'll catch up towards the end again, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit in between what it is the show was like and what questions I have and what people are thinking as well. So, Glenn, It is off to you now.
Sure. Well, first off, guys, there's no way I'm going to be able to tell you everything you need to know about, vetting tenants and going through that whole aspect. I mean, you can take entire classes that would last months to go through all the ins and outs of that. So hopefully I can give you enough information here to at least make an educated decision and at least understand some of the red flags and risks and exposure that are, going to be inherent in any deal that you buy. Second, I want to say this, and I want to say this without any certain doubt here. The tenants in our parks are the most important part of the equation, okay? If you have a tenant base that you mishandle, that you abuse, that you bully, you're not going to have a good time in this industry. It's going to come back to you, and, you might make a buck, but you might not make a buck. And it's going to be harder and harder as this industry matures to continue getting deals where you have that. I know for a fact that my team, we will not sell to an operator that does any significant tenant mismanagements and heavy rent presses. And so that's something I think more and more brokers understanding their responsibility to the tenant base that's out there is starting to kind of get in line with, because, it's so unfortunate that, that in our industry, we have the tenant base that's hands down some of the poorer, for lack of a better word, tenants, that America has to offer. I mean, we're at the lower end of wages. We're at the lower end of of lifestyle and things like that. And every rent increase you put on your tenant, you know, it has to be methodical and it has to be thought out. And you have to consider foremost, does this benefit my tenant base? It's okay to raise rents. It's totally okay. I have no problems with that. Most people have no problems understanding that you got to make adjustments here and there to be able to keep the park in proper conditions, especially when there's heavy CapEx needs. And, you know, you got to recover those costs. That's okay. You're making improvements and you're hopefully doing it the proper way. The tenant is only going to feel the impact on these things. They're not going to necessarily know that you're improving the roads next year when you go and raise their rents, 20% this year. Okay. So it becomes fundamental to really being transparent as an operator with your tenant base. So we'll get into that section here in a minute. But starting from the beginning, things you need to know about your tenants. Okay. And of course, I'm not talking about the upper end of our industry either, where it's, the 55 plus retirement type of communities with high amenities and things like that. Okay. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of this industry. The majority of the parks that you as an operator are going to be reviewing for purchase that are going to be in that, call it 30 unit to 100 unit type of size. And they're probably going to be mostly, C grade type of properties. Okay. Because that is the vast majority of what's out there once you get below the institutional level. And so, when I bought my first park, it's almost exactly what I bought. I bought, a small park, 30 something lots in the middle of nowhere, and thinking, hey, I've already dealt with Section 8 tenants in urban environments, and I've already dealt with all these other things. This will be a picnic. And it's not a picnic. It's a totally different tenant. And these tenants have their own, their own aspirations and their own limitations that you have to acknowledge because it's going to impact your bottom line. I did not vet my tenants when I bought my first park. I had no idea that was something I should do. And man, I'll tell you, that was the first big mistake I did when I bought that park. That took me years to recover from. So how do you avoid that? All right. Well, that's, something maybe we can avoid. I don't know if it's 100% avoidable because you can only do so much research on any one aspect of your due diligence. But with the tenants, you need to know first, you got to find out the history that these tenants have been paying. Okay. A lot of owners, especially in this mom and pop category of parks that they own, they write stuff down on paper. They don't have, sophisticated software that shows that John in 2 has paid all his rent currently, but Betty in number 4 is 2 months behind, and that's a regular thing. It's hard to see that on these mom and pop stuff because a lot of it is a rent roll written in pencil, okay, and adjusted as the rents come in. And with a lot of these operators, as long as they've gotten their rents in by 30 days or 60 days, they're not really saying that that's a problem. And it might not be a problem. But you need to think of it as like, geez, what is this tenant's history on paying on time? What is this tenant's history for being able to, how does this tenant's history relate to to their future ability to be able to pay the rents? Because obviously if they're not paying your rents, you're not paying your mortgage and you're going to have a hard time operating the park, right? So when you're going through the initial kind of, hey, Mr. Seller, I want to buy your park, send me a rent roll. And you're seeing that, oh, hey, look, everybody looks like they're paying rent. First thing you need to really understand is asking the seller, hey, are these actual rents that they've actually paid, or is this just the rent they're supposed to pay? And can I get a trailing 12 or a trailing 24 of all the rent rolls showing what is actually been collected and what is actually not been collected? Because that not been collected is a big part of the thing. If you're supposed to collect $100,000 a year, but you're only collecting 80%, that's kind of $80,000. That's a big delta there. You're going to want to know why. Sometimes there's just because that's how the landlord keeps the rent roll, and they speculate that the tenant will eventually catch up. So you have to really dig into that part before you can even start to understand your tenant base. Then once you've gotten a handle on the payers and the non-payers, you need to ask the landlord, and it's an uncomfortable question, but usually you can get to the bottom of it by asking them, about who's the riffraff in this park. Riffraff is a big problem, and what I mean by riffraff is your knuckleheads, your guys that just won't pay you no matter what on time ever, and that's going to be a significant portion of your tenants. You know, a lot of these guys, at least at my park, and at least on these smaller deals that we've done, where we're seeing this, is a lot of these tenants, just because they got paid on Friday, does not mean that if you go and collect that rent on Monday, that they're still going to have that money for one reason or another. I'm not saying that they're necessarily mishandling their own money, but they have other bills, obligations, and things to be, concerned with. So you have to really understand the collections. And I would highly recommend, if you're under contract on a park, to go spend, a week or so there at the first of the month and kind of understand from the seller's point of view how he does his collections and what those collections look like and who he's given some extensions to and who he's clamping down on. Usually they clamp down on the riffraff, trying to get those guys to pay up or get out. And, the riffraff sometimes has some real good stories about everybody in their family having all these massive problems, and it's their responsibility to take care of them. But it's an ongoing type of problem. And then oftentimes there's just a guy or a woman who's having challenges today, this one time. Maybe they lost their job, maybe they got sick, and it's going to be a few months before they can, really catch up on the rent. And how are you going to deal with that with this tenant? Because all of this plays in to, your bottom line at the end of the day. I mean, it's, a lot of people, oh, if you don't pay, you don't stay. Well, I don't know if that's really the best argument to make, because turnover is expensive. And oftentimes, when I was looking at my park, if I could get everybody caught up, by the end of the year, by by tax day, when they all have received all of the refunds and stuff, then I was usually probably okay with it. But I was kind of a bleeding heart anyway. So I don't know that was the best practice to do. But when I looked at my NOI over a year, that to me made me feel better that I didn't have to jeopardize these tenants by putting them out on the street when they were already having a difficult time, especially if they're able to get caught up after a few months. Not everybody takes that same philosophy, from the tenant base. But when you go and research this park, you're really going to want to interview the tenants, okay? And I don't mean like, sit down and talk with the guy for 2 hours each. I mean, you're going to want to do an estoppel letter, which in our business is going to sound like a dirty word. Most sellers are not going to understand what that means. So, we've gotten in the habit of calling it a rent verification letter, where you're going to go and knock on the tenant's door and you're going to talk with them for 5 or 10 minutes, verify that they are in fact, a lot renter paying X amount of dollars when they moved in, and typically, you're going to want to ask some additional questions to that, about, are they on a lease or things like that, and verify what the seller's telling you about this tenant. And if it was me, I would probably go into some personal stories about them and understand a little bit, about their job, understand a little bit about their family, understand a bit about the challenges that they have in their life. Because what you're going to find out is when you go through that whole park and you've gotten all these responses, there's going to be some commonalities. You're going to hear about, how this thing or that thing is always, a problem for the park, or how this tenant or that tenant's always a problem for the park. And you're going to want to really understand this. And you'll find, unfortunately, more often than not in these parks that, there's a lot of desperation in these tenants, like they feel very mishandled and very much like the least important aspect of the transaction. And I just have to believe that as a good owner, as I've seen being practiced by many good owners in our industry, that the guys who treat those type of tenants well and live up to the word and give them a break every now and then and doesn't just jam rent increases down their throats, those guys, at least by the time they're letting me sell their park, seem to be able to get better values on their parks because they have a tenant base that's very loyal and very sticky. They're not worried about losing their homes. And, when you go through that whole worrying about losing your home, it's a scary time. I don't know if you guys have ever been through that aspect, but, I can tell you when I started, that was like number one on my list of like biggest fears was like, gosh, am I going to be able to pay rent this month? And is this jerk landlord going to just try and just hassle me because he's got nothing better to do? And you have to understand that mentality. It causes desperation, it causes depression, it causes anxiety, and all these other factors that are going to make it harder for your tenants to pay, not easier. Okay, the bullying of a tenant does not influence the tenant to pay you the rent. It just makes them resentful about paying you rent. And sometimes though you have to evict people, and it's okay. It's absolutely okay to evict problem people out of your park, true non-payers out of your park, and people that are disrupting the level of peacefulness and happiness at that park. It's absolutely okay to evict. But you have to understand the impacts that you're going to have on these people and their family and the people that, that are taking residence on your piece of dirt that you're renting out as lot rent or as a home rent. Now, the tenants who rent park-owned homes versus the tenants that are lot rent only type of tenants, the ones who own their own homes, they are often a lot different. Okay, there is more security in the lot rent tenants. Okay, and the rents are fairly cheap. Whereas if they're renting a park-owned home, and especially an older kind of not the most sexy-looking park-owned home, you have to understand what got them there. I promise you, they didn't choose that just to give up and move into this 1970s trailer. It's one of the few options available to them, and the mentality with those type of tenants there can be extremely challenging to work with. Okay, but you as a landlord, you have an obligation. You're providing housing for these people. Even if you don't like, this, that, or the other about them, you still have to give them the respect that they're a human and that they, can, given the opportunity, have the ability to pay the rents and deserve a safe, clean house to live in. And it is your responsibility as a landlord to make sure that that's true for them. I mean, we all have a basic need, and housing is right there at the bottom of basic needs. I mean, you need it before you can do anything else in life. Now, other park owners, and some that I tremendously respect, what they've gone is they've gone the extra mile and said, geez, I know I'm dealing with low income. I know I'm dealing with some mental health issues. I know I'm dealing with some, near poverty type of level issues. What can I do to the betterment of my tenants? Okay, not CapEx, not, I'll put some new landscaping in or put in a new sign. Okay, no, not that kind of stuff. English as a second language, that's a big one now. That doesn't cost you very much to put that into your business plan. Helping them with their resumes, spending a little bit of time with them saying, hey, tenants of my park, I'll hold office hours for an hour or two a week to help you work on a business plan or help you build out your resume or help you apply for some jobs or help you apply for some local assistance on some things. These are important things that you could do that really don't cost you a lot of time. That's going to develop extreme loyalty to your tenant base. And when you do have to put a rent increase in them, even if it's a little heavier than what you might want to do in a normal year, it's okay because they understand the value. On that note, what I tend to do, at least at my park, and what I advise all the time is go find all the parks in the 5 or 10 mile radius of your park. Go put them up on a board, where the mailboxes are, and show what that park's name is and what their rents are and where you compare to them. It's okay to be at the top of the list. It's okay to be at the bottom of the list or anywhere in between. But that transparency is giving your tenants the understanding of what is available, and it's showing them that, hey, I'm not here just to, beat you up on things. I want you to have options. I want you to know where we stand according to our other communities out here, and let them decide if that's a better community at a better price. And, it's okay to be above market in your own community if you have a nicer park and your tenants are handled well and they really, respect the progress the park is making. You'll often find they don't want to move their home. They got friendships in this park. They have friends that, it's kind of funny, when you're in a park and you get to see how almost all of them, they band together. They really do, especially in these smaller parks. They often stay there, for the majority of the day outside of their working hours, and they develop strong friendships and bonds. And they don't want to disrupt all that just because a park down the street of equal quality is getting a little bit less in rent. The cost of moving is expensive, and the loss of friendship is almost more detrimental to them than the small increase in pricing that you're charging over them. So it's okay to just be like, hey, here's everything you need to know, and then give them a list of reasons why to stay these additional programs. Hey, if you need, help, if you're going to be late on your rent next month, talk with us. We probably have something we can work with you on. Instead of being the hammer that's always coming down, be the hand that's helping up. And that's really going to help build some loyalty. And that overcomes a lot of the tenant issues. Jumping back now, back to, other things you need to know about your tenant base when you're first getting involved in a deal is, without a doubt, you got to run a criminal report. Okay, without a doubt, you got to run, a sexual predator report. Without a doubt. without it. You got to do those two things. If you have those type of riffraff in your park, it's going to be detrimental to your entire park. When you forget, hey, this guy's got this wad of cash, just like I want to move in, that's often a big red flag. Okay. And everybody's got their own opinions on what's acceptable and isn't acceptable in their park. But what I would suggest is that all your tenants really need to have a bank account, and if they can't afford a bank account, help them get a bank account set up or find some way where they can put their money in. And so you can, put them onto an auto pay for your rents. Now it's a touchy subject. A lot of tenants at the lower end don't have bank accounts. And so it makes them kind of hard to vet, because their credit report's going to be bad and they don't have a bank account showing, how much money they got. But I would suggest if you teach them how to do that, once for your existing tenant base, of course, it's going to help you in the long run, especially when you think about going to sell and the next guy can walk into somebody with tenants who's already set up on all the auto pays and things like that. It makes your bookkeeping a lot easier too, and reduces the brain damage and the headaches of getting tenants to pay. Because once it becomes kind of autonomous, it makes it a lot easier for these tenants to say, oh, wait, I got this thing coming up. I need to talk to them before it gets pulled. So a couple things, about, other things about the tenants, especially going back to the criminal type of stuff. If you have real criminals in your park and your business plan isn't operating a park for real criminals, which oddly that is a business plan for some parks and they get insanely good rents, despite the fact that they have bad tenants there, because it's a last option type of place. But for the majority of us, we don't want that kind of challenges when we pick up a park. So you want to get that kind of riffraff out. You just need to. There's other places for people to go, and maybe they're a recovering criminal and they got a track record to show it. Maybe that's a different story. But if they're in and out of jail regularly, they're probably going to be disruptive in your park. If they're showing you a wad of cash, saying, "Hey, let me prepay 3 or 4 or 5 months rent to move in," there might be something that you're not seeing under the table there. That everybody used to tell me they were a landscaper when they'd come to my park. They would show me $1,000, $2,000. Let me just move in, and then I'll prepay. I work, as a landscaper. And then you start seeing the traffic come in and out of their house. And I don't know what kind of landscaping that is, but their lawn's always high and their bills are never paid. And, it seems like you have some problems. Then you got to go evict them. And that's just a whole pain in the butt within itself. So be really weary about the wad of cash. Be really weary about the criminal that keeps reoccurring, especially the guys that, are doing the type of crimes that are going to happen at your park, domestic violence. Okay. You don't want that in your park. Okay. You don't want that at all anywhere, but you don't want that in your park. It's very disruptive. The police are always there, and it's going to give your other tenants a little bit of anxiety because who knows what else is going on in their houses. You just don't want that there. So you need to get that kind of stuff out. And you want to make your good tenants, feel as safe as possible. And after you go through owning these things, you'll see the patterns and you'll see the guys who are consistently problematic, and you have to take care of it. Okay. It's a Band-Aid. You just got to pull it off and you got to get them out. The next thing you want to do is, talk to your court systems there and the police stations there and see how often they come out to the park, even if they didn't, arrest anybody, but how often they come in, is the police coming out there for a disturbance of this, that, or the other. That's an important metric for you to understand. Sometimes there's no problem. Sometimes you got perfect parks. You let your grandma rent the home at, and you let your daughter collect the rents. And hey, those are not the parks I'm talking about. I'm talking about all the kind of parks that are not that way. The kind of park that I first bought, where it's like I had no idea that people are going to get that drunk and that rowdy and do that much drugs and have this many problems the moment the new guy shows up and they just decide to do whatever they want. At some point during my park, because I didn't follow these steps of vetting the tenants and understanding my tenants, I had to evict almost everybody. I had a full revolution at my park of my tenants saying that, they don't want to pay rent anymore. And that, is very disruptive. I had to evict something like 75% of my tenants over a course of 6 months. I was left with nobody in that park almost, except really good tenants. And then I was able to get really good tenants to come in place because we had finally shifted the balance in that park. And that was a painful year. That was a very painful year. And that's not something you want to go through. And if you're, doing the GPLP model, your LPs are going to be pissed. If you skip this really important step of vetting the tenants and go through something like what I went through. And it was preventable. That's the craziest part about it all. It was preventable. Had I known what I know now when I got started, I could have prevented this from day one, and I could have made the adjustments on day 2. And by day 3, I would have been in the clear. And that is what you should be kind of aiming for, is uncovering as much of this other side of the industry that a lot of us just don't think about. The tenants. So you talk about the most important things in buying a park, right? Location being obviously, one of the primary things you have to worry about in any real estate transaction is location. Well, right below that is the tenants. And you don't know your tenants, you might as well just, throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, because that's how I felt. And you got to really just, take the bull by the horns and turn that park at that point. Easier to solve in the beginning than later on. So right behind the tenant base is the municipalities, and these all kind of tie in together. So you really got to understand, especially if you're in a small town, these, the police stations and the municipalities, they know these parks. They know exactly what's happening at these parks. They're more than happy to tell you all the problems about these parks, about these tenants, and, the history that's going on there. Check it out. It's very, very important.
Geez. Glenn, thank you a lot for that. That was really insightful, as always. I have been making some notes here as you were speaking. As you know, every week I make notes and then I talk to you a little bit about it after. So my takeaway really from this, and I don't know what the viewers' takeaway with this is the tenant base is probably the most important thing in this industry to understand when looking at a mobile home park. Is that a fair comment you would say?
Absolutely. Top priority. First thing you should be looking at, once you have the seller giving you some documentation and understanding that, hey, that there's a deal that you want to be made here, the next thing out of your mouth is be like, so tell me about the tenants. Mm-hmm. Tell me who's the problem. Tell me who's the ringleader. Tell me who's the good ones. Tell me who's the guys who I can always count on when something goes down, to be the guy who calls me that there's something happening here. Tell me about your tenants. And on these smaller parks, I would almost go through them one by one and just be like, what about Bob? What about John? What about Betty? And really understand your tenant base, because, everything in life, at least how I measure it, you got time, you got value, and you got headache. And when that scale teeters, man, like the headache side gets too high, the money ain't worth it, So understanding that aspect is paramount to your success in this business.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings me to my other point that I noted. You said mobile home park tenants are unlike any other, for example, like, the people that you would find renting homes in like a multifamily or something like that. That is something that I actually did not think about off the top of my head, but it's a very valid point that these guys and them are not unlike. They're sort of the lower income class.
I hate to use that term low end. I know some amazing people who live in parks who have no dollars to rub together, no nickels to rub together, and they've had nothing but challenges their whole life. But their hearts are big and beautiful, and they're sincere. So the low end, I don't know if this is the right term, but I understand the phrase and what we're trying to imply by this. They are the most challenged tenant base of the tenant bases that I've been involved with. Okay, there is no extra money floating around. Okay, that just doesn't happen. At least when you're in apartment buildings and some of these other stuff, usually the tenants have a bank account. Often they have some minimal amount of savings or a minimal amount of emergency funds of some sort. But oftentimes our tenant base in our industry just doesn't have any of that, and they don't have the opportunity to get a better job or the chance to go back to school and get a better education, get a better job. So you have to be cognizant of that. And you can't be a jerk about it. You can't be like, oh, well, it's their fault for their life decisions. Nah, that's not how it works. That's entitlement. When you just said, what I just said about the tenant base. You have to have a more humane approach and understanding where these guys are starting from. Because I promise you, the line that most of us started at, they're starting way below that line.
Yeah. That's true. Which kind of, understanding who the knuckleheads are when considering buying a mobile home park, not just taking the seller's word for it, but actually being able to walk out there and interview, learn a little bit more, is what you said, ensure they are who they say they are, and be able to verify what the seller is saying as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You need to talk to your tenants. You have to first interview the seller. Okay, the seller is just as likely to lie to you, just like anybody else. Oh, everybody's great here; they're all payers. Okay, like
Yeah.
right? So maybe okay, but now go do your stopple letters and your tenant stuff. Go meet with them. Go say,
Yeah.
hey, how long you been here? How much you paying? What do you think about this place? You're under contract. Your due diligence allows you to go interview these tenants. If you don't do that, that's your own fault. If you get to the closing table before that interview happens, and then you wonder why, John in number two is just a total irate person all the time.
Yeah.
You have to understand this beforehand. It's your fault, not their fault, if you don't do that part.
Yeah. And I think you made a very valid point that probably a lot of people, when dealing with mobile home parks, don't really do is, and I really like what you said, in your parks that you manage and you own, you actually go out there and you understand what their needs are. You help them with their resume, their business plans. That actually proves that you also care about your tenant base as well, and they would then in return care about you, which is a valuable asset in a mobile home park manager or an owner to have. But considering that I'm fairly new to this industry, and I make no excuses there, but you almost think that the people in these parks are not treated equally, as we said earlier, and you being able to do that for them actually makes sure that they're cared for, they're looked after, and they support you, and they would always try and protect you. So I commend you on that. That's a really good job in what it is you do, and I hope that more people would take away from this who are going to invest in mobile home parks and actually take your approach as well.
I would hope so too. And look, guys, I'm just some dude. I don't know if what I'm saying is the best, practice moving forward. I just know that that's what feels for me in my heart as how I'm making $1 off of a poor person. I better be able to justify it as I'm helping that guy out and not squeezing that guy so I can buy my wife a bigger car, and that's a very important aspect to bring. So your tenant's going to call you out on that. You pull up into your park with a Mercedes Benz or something, even if it's a 2005 Mercedes Benz, they're still going to sit there and be like, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me. And you're going to squeeze me for another $100 a month, and like I don't like to have that conversation. I don't like to have to justify myself. I don't think anybody else would. But if I said, hey, I'm buying your park and, next year I'm going to have to get the rents up to a certain level. But in the meantime, I'm going to spend this amount of money and I'm going to do these kind of projects. And I'm really going to get to understand what your real needs are so I can help you get a better foothold in life. It goes a long way because now you're being transparent. And if they can't afford it, I understand. And they understand, at least they don't feel squeezed, But if you're like, hey, I'm going to put in a big, beautiful, pool or clubhouse into this little park that's going to do no value for you, and then I'm going to jack your rents up, you'll get some solid feedback. We don't need a pool. We don't need a clubhouse. What we need are paved roads. What we need is, is a better, system of this, that, or the other. And that's the kind of feedback you want to hear because it will help you plan your CapEx much more accordingly.
Yeah, I think people forget that it's people that they're dealing with sometimes, and we all start from that same place, having nothing. It's just some people were fortunate than others. The one thing that you did mention, and being an ex-police as myself, as you know, was quite interesting. You said criminal offense reports are a very valuable piece of asset that you should actually look at when getting it, even though there is mobile home parks that are dedicated solely to offenders. But you said, like, for example, like sexual offenders, you got to be careful because you don't want to put somebody who is from a sexual offense background into a park where there's families and stuff like that. So being able to not discriminate is the word I want to use there, is a very fine line that one has to tread. So I think you did put it quite clear for somebody who was looking at this, to not be able to being able to ride that fine line and not discriminate is something that you should be able to look into as well. And it is something that anybody who's taken or doing a vetting process should be looking at a criminal record.
And obviously, we're not talking about color of skin or religion or any of that kind of stuff. That shouldn't have any appeal or opinion to how you navigate stuff. Like, that's so archaic. If you're still all in that mentality, just go away. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm referring to are the habitual criminals. Okay. I'm not talking about the guy who got busted for, selling a quarter bag of weed somewhere, or the guy who, had a, public drunk and disorderly and things like that. I'm talking about the habitual guys, the guys who consistently are in and out. You can't have those guys there at your park. And maybe somebody served some time. My park manager served years and years and years in jail, but he was reformed, and he was the best park manager I ever had, and my tenants really related with him because I gave him a shot. He was the most loyal person and friend that I had at the time until he unfortunately died, 5 or 6 years later in the park, in his home, just from old age, So these are things that, you can't just see a one moment version of who this person is on paper and say yes or no. I don't think that's the right way to go.
No.
I understand sometimes you have to, because maybe you have, just too many tenants and they have to meet a certain threshold and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, skin color, religion, sexual orientation, all that kind of stuff shouldn't matter at all. What should matter is that person going to be a good tenant, and are they going to help my park be a better park, or are they going to be disruptive to my park? And our history should be able to tell you that by getting that police report, understanding, who, what they're going in and out of jail for and things like that, because it's just detrimental to your future success in this park. I sold plenty of criminal parks filled with, prostitutes and gangbangers and drug dealers and all these kind of things. These exist. It is what it is. Okay. I don't think that's the kind of park you guys want to own. I don't think. maybe it is. Some people build a business plan around that, but it's not the kind of park I would want to own. And the amount of headaches, I can't even imagine. The kind of headaches that go into that kind of stuff.
No, definitely. And it goes back to our point, when you buy in a park, you want to go in and interview them and stuff. And the last point I have is a big word of cash is a big no-no. That is usually flags or signs for something serious to come. So, but I think that's common sense. Everybody should know that, but it's always good to reiterate that.
But the reason I say it is because it's so common. It's so common, man. And like when you're bleeding a little bit at your park and you're like, I just want to have somebody fill in my park, like I just need somebody to move in because my income's low and I need some money now. And this guy he matches, my expectation of what a good tenant looks like, arbitrarily. That wad of cash, most of the time, they ain't a landscaper, man. Most of the time is all I'm saying, and I don't mean to judge and I don't mean to belittle, but oftentimes that tenant's going to be a problem for you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Glenn, that was a nice show today. I appreciate your time. As always, we look forward to having you on this show. I think your knowledge and your experience and your stories telling is absolutely wonderful. We always enjoy having you here. So is there any last words that you want to leave with anybody before we sign off for today?
Well, guys, I'm happy to talk to you all about any of these questions that we have about this subject or any of the other subjects relating to our industry. You don't have to use me or my team as any kind of broker. We'll never charge you for nothing unless if we transact. And, there's plenty of other, capable people out there just trying to make a difference in this industry that you can absolutely rely on. But if you want my opinion on something, don't hesitate to reach out. I answer every email. I return every call. And it's, you might get an email or, something from me at 4 or 5 in the morning, because that might be the only time of day I can respond to it. But you'll get a response. We're here to help you. We want to build the empathetic capitalist, kind of aspect into our industry. And we're here to help you guys do that and embody that, because that's what it's going to take for our industry to get to the next level. And that's my mission in life right now.
All right, Glenn, thanks for those closing remarks. And if they wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way to get hold of you again?
Best way is through my website. That's the mhpexpert.com or at EstersonMHCteam.com. Both will get you to us. My full contact info is on there. Of course, I'm on social media stuff. You can just, Google or whatever my name and reach out anytime. Call me, email me, text me. I respond.
Cool. And you can also reach out to us guys on GCRE. We'll be more than happy to connect you with Glenn if you wanted to, if you can get hold of him. So Glenn, it was nice talking to you again. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, 4 p.m. Central Europe time, 10 a.m. Eastern time, US border. It was a pleasure having you again, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Always a pleasure, Gavin.
Take care. Bye.